Right, so the Trade Union Congress 2023 is underway right now. Wowzers, exciting stuff, Damo. Think of it as like a party political conference for all the different trade unions to come together and find some common ground, if you will. But one motion in particular, notably supported by Sharon Graham's Unite, has got people up in arms. Though maybe that's a poor choice of words given the circumstances. The motion brought forward by the right-wing-led GMB Union is motion C21, Solidarity with Ukraine. Maybe this doesn't seem like anything particularly unusual. There is a lot of support going on in the UK for Ukraine right now. But from a trade union standpoint, from a trade unionist point of view, this ought to be pretty worrying, actually, and I'll come to the why that is presently. First, let's have a look at this situation between Russia and Ukraine, because the way the media portray it, the way they want you to regard it, it's very black and white, isn't it? Russia bad, Ukraine good. It's very easy to do that when Russia did invade Ukraine. But as always, the situation isn't black and white. It's full of shades of grey. Now, I don't want to focus on Russia too much here. For one, I've covered the issue in other videos. For two, the TUC motion is in relation to Ukraine specifically. But NATO expansion eastwards, whatever you think of Putin, is a provocation, or was a provocation, especially when you consider such expansion was promised not to happen in order to see the Berlin Wall brought down way back when. The West has not kept to that. Now, you can make arguments for saying Putin's own actions drove that. You can make arguments that the West had poked the bear. Like I say, it's grey areas, not black and white. We're not in a spaghetti western here where all the good guys wear the white hats and all the bad guys wear the black ones. Equally, Ukraine isn't all sunshine and flowers itself. A coup left it basically a puppet government of the US on Russia's doorstep, poking the bear. Yes, they're the ones who have been attacked, and yes, they're the ones that have been invaded. As much as the focus of Volodymyr Zelensky in the media is one of asking for help, asking for aid, for arms, taking the fight to the Russians, it's not only that should be a matter of concern, but the other actions he has taken under the cover of this war as well. From the military perspective, if I start with that, it's the one that we all think of first and foremost, isn't it? The main beef most in the West have with Ukraine, the main criticism we have of the Ukrainians, is the neo-Nazis they literally have in their armed forces. The Azov battalion, replete with all manner of fascist iconography and blazoned across all of their livery as it is. People will deny their presence. Zelensky is Jewish, they say. Why would he endure such a thing? Well, they're there. A UN moratorium on condemning Nazism was passed in 2021, with only 2 countries, in fact, refusing to vote for it. In fact, they voted against it, no less. And they were the US and Ukraine. So answer that one. Military aid to Ukraine as far back as 2018, so well before the Russian invasion, when the US were active in Ukraine, puppet government and all of that, they passed a bill in the US to supply arms to Ukraine. But there was a stipulation in that. And that stipulation was that none of it was to go to the Azov battalion. They argue that they are patriots, not Nazis, this battalion. But when you're wearing the symbology that you wear, and we're long known to be present in Ukraine before war broke out in Russia, having existed since 2014, having built up by recruiting extremists from across the globe as they have, it's not something people are going to ignore and are going to set aside. But for the purposes of this video, which is not going to concentrate on that, let's set that aside, because the main reason for this video and why it comes down to trade unionism and why it bothers so many of us in the trade union movement and in Unite as I am is the fact that Zelensky has used the war to dismantle labour rights. Ukraine say this is essential in the face of the war, but is it? Because what they've done is remove the rights at work on working hours, working conditions, unfair dismissal. They have given employers increased leverage over their workforces. This all came into law last August, Law 5371, really catchy title, gripping stuff. But what it means is for as long as the country remains under martial law, but ultimately these things will remain in effect. But ultimately, it means some 70% of the Ukrainian workforce have lost significant rights at work. We all very much take for granted here. Perhaps we take them too much for granted here, given the sort of government we've got these days. But they've lost their rights to collective bargaining. They've lost significant rights at work. And Ukraine's Federation of Trade Unions has been rendered largely toothless. The entire thing has been opposed, naturally, as you would expect, but you won't have heard about it. You'd be lucky if you've heard about these laws going through at all. Not least of which by the Federation of Trade Unions themselves, which is basically Ukraine's equivalent of our TUC, basically. So don't you find it a bit weird that our trade unions at our TUC conference aren't siding with them, but with Zelensky and their government instead? Don't you find that weird? Don't you think so? The TUC here did complain at the time about these laws being passed in Ukraine. yet now they're passing motions of support with the government there instead. It is bizarre. Incidentally, another two far less well-reported laws, not that this news was particularly well-reported itself, but even less well-reported, were two other laws that were also signed off just before this one was. One of them legalised zero-hour contracts in the country. I wonder if Bozo on one of his paid-for jollies sold the idea to his buddy Zelensky, but that law will stay in place after martial law is lifted. So that was blatantly an opportunistic move against their own workforce by the Ukrainian government. And the other law allows employers to stop paying workers who've been called up to fight. So how perverse is that? About as perverse as this solidarity motion with Ukraine by trade unionists, in which case, don't you find? Let's have a look at that motion then, just the accusations made, just to justify the solidarity of this motion that they're saying. Congress unequivocally condemns Russia's illegal, aggressive invasion of Ukraine. Congress notes, 1, the systematic repression of free trade unions under Putin and Lukashenko and their suppression in the occupied territories of Ukraine since 2014. 2, appeals from Ukrainian unions for moral and material aid, including the means of Ukraine's self-defense. 3, that those who suffer most in times of war are the working class, and that the labour movement must do all it can to prevent conflict, however that is not always possible. 4, the TUC's proud history of solidarity with victims of fascist imperialist aggression included support for arms to the Spanish Republic. As trade unionists, we are inherently anti-imperialistic, and our job is to fight imperialism and tyranny at every opportunity. We recognise that a victory for Putin in Ukraine will be a success for reactionary authoritarian politics across the world. 5, the horrendous human and environmental cost of the Ukrainian conflict. Millions of people have been forced to abandon their homes and flee, while many others have lost their lives. 6, the Russian program of ethnic cleansing. And finally, 7, that trade unions across Ukraine have shown true solidarity and support by offering shelter and food to refugees. ASLEF has worked closely with Ukrainian rail unions and seen the tremendous work that they have done to support workers in these times of conflict. Okay, let's take them one by one and shred them, basically. Point 1, repression of free trade unions by Putin in Russia. Yes. Lukashenko in Belarus. Yes. The Law 5371 in Ukraine was ratified by Zelensky, ratified by the Ukrainian government against its own people. So why no mention of that there? You are willfully ignoring the actions going on in Ukraine here. You kicked off about Law 5371 when it was passed last August. Why is that not in your motion? Are you on the side of all workers or just some of them? Is collective bargaining for all or just a few? Point 2, appeals from Ukraine's trade unions for moral or material aid, including self-defense, from Russia or from your own government here. They aren't exactly on your side in all of this if they're ramming through anti-worker legislation that will remain once this war is over. Point 3, those that suffer most of the working class, that can't always be prevented in times of war, sadly true. Point 4, the TUC have a proud history of solidarity of victims of fascism. Well, that's ropey ground when some of Ukraine's troops themselves are fascists, and it's pretty tyrannical in my mind to hit workers' rights at a time of war. Don't you agree? 5, I totally agree with. 6, I don't argue with either, though again, this is a grey area in Ukraine too. And 7, yes, welcoming refugees is great to see, and doing so in a time of war is a great thing to be doing. Though how many refugees, perhaps fleeing war, want to be homed in a country also at war? I can't imagine, frankly. It seems odd. ASLEF incidentally seconded this GMB motion, which for a left-leaning union, as I actually think of them, I also found this rather odd, but given their own involvement with Ukrainian trade unions on a one-to-one level, perhaps that can be explained via point 7. There is no escaping the fact, though, that for all the fine words of this motion that Volodymyr Zelensky tore up workers' rights when he saw the chance to, so are trade unions offering solidarity via this motion appalls me. Russian aggression might be the immediate threat, but disenfranchisement looks set to replace that when all is said and done. You can argue Russia winning might be worse for them, but the least worst option still isn't a good one. So why are our unions queuing up to support that? Well, right-wing ones, trade unions with right-wing leaderships, and it should be remembered that trade unions are far more politically diverse than political parties are. So the GMB pushing this might not be too surprising. Others like Unison passing it won't be a surprise to many trade unionists either. But yet again, Unite hasn't failed to disappoint. Sharon Graham, a supposed left-wing candidate to run the union, has proven to be a populist, frankly, in my view, taking whatever action she thinks will give her a publicity boost. Yet in reality, she has repeatedly stood by Keir Starmer, even inviting him to Unite's conference a few months ago and banning any delegates who wouldn't keep silent while he spoke, desperate to speak out against him as they were. She's put him on notice more times than he's told a lie, and he seems to do that with every other drawn breath. She's been directly linked to the banning of the Jeremy Corbyn film The Big Lie in Unite Properties, something appalling the left, largely, widely, an important piece of work exposing the factional damage done to the party she funds to keep it out of power by the same people running it today. She'll likely feature prominently in the planned sequel. To people singularly sick and tired of her conduct, this may not surprise too many people either. Across social media, people are raging over this latest move, ending their Unite memberships over it. Nobody gets involved in trade unionism to see those that purport to stand for our rights at work abandoning their fellow working class citizens in sister unions in other countries, yet that is what this motion is, in my view, doing. It is all about bash Russia, ignoring all the bad that has happened and is still happening with regards to workers' rights in Ukraine. What is Sharon thinking is a tweet I've read over and over. In my opinion, she's thinking the same thing she always does, about herself. What do you reckon about the actions of our unions in relation to this motion, though? Are you disgusted or do you back it? Are you thinking of leaving your respective union over this, or have you already done so? Tell me all about it. Is there too much whitewashing of Ukraine in this conflict, or do you disagree? And why is that? Have your say in the comments. Join in the conversation. Tell me about it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where the Tories a few months ago were all set for sending Ukraine Typhoon jets, no less, but there was a wee problem with that. And, well, I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.